Hello, my friend, and welcome back to this powerful episode of your daily motivation and English learning. Today, we're going to talk about something that quietly shapes the course of your life. It's not your job title, not your appearance, not even your level of education. It's confidence, but not the loud kind of confidence that tries to take up space and control the room. We're talking about quiet strength, the kind that walks into a room and doesn't need to say much, the kind that listens deeply, that faces life with calm eyes and a steady heart, the kind of confidence that doesn't shout because it doesn't have to. That's the kind of confidence we'll explore together today. And here's the good news. Confidence is not something you're born with. It's not something that only special people have. It's something you build, one habit at a time. You see, confident people don't just feel different. They do things differently. They move through life with small but powerful habits that send a message to the world and to themselves. I know who I am. I trust myself. I'm still growing, and that's okay. But I belong here. So in this episode, we'll walk through 10 key habits of highly confident people, not just the usual tips you find in a list, but real stories, real reflections, and simple, powerful lessons you can apply today. Even if you're just starting your journey, each habit will help you speak better English, but more importantly, it will help you speak with more confidence in any language. Because when your voice becomes steady, your presence becomes powerful. If you've ever felt like you weren't enough, if you've ever doubted your words, your choices, your future, then today is for you. This episode isn't about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering the strength that's already inside you and learning how to let it rise. So find a quiet place. Put on your headphones and listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. Let's begin. Let's build the kind of confidence that changes everything, gently but powerfully. Let's learn the 10 habits of highly confident people. Habit 1. They maintain eye contact. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone who couldn't look you in the eye? Maybe they kept glancing down. Maybe their eyes moved around the room, never settling. Maybe they looked at their phone more than they looked at you. How did it make you feel? Unimportant? Invisible? Like they weren't really there with you? Now think about someone who looked you straight in the eyes. Not in an aggressive way, but with calm, steady presence. Someone who made you feel seen, heard, respected. That is the power of eye contact. It may seem like a small thing, but in human communication, eye contact is everything. I remember a story about a young woman who had just started her first job after university. She was smart, qualified, very capable. But she had one problem. She couldn't hold eye contact with her boss or with clients. She wasn't shy exactly. She just felt unsure, afraid that if she looked someone in the eyes too long, they would see her doubt. They would see her mistakes. They would somehow know she wasn't as confident as she appeared on paper. So she looked down a lot at her notes, at the floor, at her coffee cup. And little by little, people started treating her differently. Her boss would often ask someone else to lead meetings. Clients would avoid asking her questions. She didn't understand what was going wrong until one day a colleague pulled her aside. He said, "You have great ideas, but no one can feel your presence if you don't meet their eyes." Those words hit her hard because they were true. She wasn't being ignored because she lacked intelligence. She was being ignored because she didn't show up fully. And the simplest way to show up is to meet someone's gaze. So she started practicing. At first it felt strange, too intense, uncomfortable. But she didn't give up. She tried it at the coffee shop, with the security guard at the office, with her teammates, during lunch, and slowly she noticed something incredible. When she looked people in the eyes, they responded differently. They listened, they smiled, they paid attention. It wasn't magic, it was confidence. Not the kind of confidence you shout about, but the kind that simply says, "I'm here. I'm not afraid to be seen." Eye contact builds trust. Whether you're interviewing for a job, speaking English with someone new, or just trying to connect with a friend, the eyes are where connection begins. But for many people, especially language learners, eye contact feels scary. Because when you're trying to think of the right words in English, it's easy to look away, to hide behind your thoughts, to search for safety in the air. But what if you practiced holding your gaze, even while thinking? What if you trained yourself to be present, even in silence? That is confidence. There's a story from a village, classroom in a remote area. A teacher used to ask her students to stand up and introduce themselves in English. One day a boy stood up. He said, "My name is Aaron. I am 12 years old." But his eyes never left the floor. The teacher smiled gently and said, "Aaron, look at me when you speak. I want to see your eyes." Arun looked up, just for a second, and then looked down again. The teacher said, "When you speak with your eyes, people feel your heart." That small moment stayed with him forever. Years later, when Arun gave his first TEDx talk, he began with the same words. "My name is Arun. I am 27 years old." This time, he looked into the eyes of hundreds of people in the audience, and they listened, because the eyes tell a story, even before the mouth opens. You might be wondering, what if I feel nervous? What if eye contact feels unnatural to me? That's okay. You don't need to stare. You don't need to lock eyes like a movie villain. Just start small. Here's a little technique called the triangle gaze. When you're speaking to someone, shift your eyes gently between their left eye, right eye, and mouth. This keeps your focus soft and natural. It gives you a rhythm without freezing. You can also practice with yourself. Stand in front of a mirror. Say your name. Say where you're from. Look at your own eyes as you speak. At first, it may feel awkward, but over time, it becomes powerful because you're not just learning to look at others, you're learning to see yourself. Here's another practice. The next time you're in a conversation, pause for just 2 seconds before you reply. And during that pause, make eye contact just for 2 seconds. This short pause sends a strong message. It says, "I'm listening. I'm present. I respect this moment." And the truth is, the confident people don't rush. They know that stillness speaks louder than noise. So give your eyes time to connect. and your words will carry more weight. One more story. There was a woman in her 40s who had just started learning English. She worked in a bakery and served dozens of customers every day. But every time someone spoke to her in English, she would look away and whisper her response. One day, a kind customer said, "You have beautiful eyes. Why don't you show them?" The woman laughed shyly. Then, the customer said something that changed her. "Your English is already good, but when you hide your eyes, we miss your kindness." From that day on, she tried, one eye contact at a time. A week later, a customer said, "You look more confident lately. Did something change?" She smiled and said, "I started showing up. That's what confident people do. They don't wait to be perfect. They don't hide behind silence. They show up with their eyes. Because when you look someone in the eyes, you are saying, 'I see you, and I'm not afraid to be seen.' So even if you're still learning, even if you make mistakes in English, even if you feel uncertain inside, lift your head, hold your gaze, and let the world feel your presence. It starts with your eyes. It starts with belief, and it starts now. Habit 2. They speak with a steady, calm voice. What does confidence sound like? It doesn't sound like shouting, it doesn't sound like rushing, and it doesn't sound like trying to impress. Confidence sounds like calm, like clarity, like peace that fills the space. Not because it's loud, but because it's present. Let me tell you a story. There was a young man who worked at a hotel reception desk. He was new to the job, and his English was not perfect. Every time a foreign guest approached, his heart would beat fast. He wanted to do well. He wanted to sound professional. So he spoke quickly. Too quickly. "Hello, how may I help you? Please, your check-in time is 2 p.m. Thank you." Guests often looked confused. Some asked him to repeat himself. Others just nodded and walked away. At the end of his first week, his supervisor called him in. She said, "You're doing great, but remember, your voice is part of the guest's experience. When you speak calmly, they feel calm too." That night, he sat in front of his mirror and practiced the same sentence again and again. "Hello? How may I help you? Your check-in time is 2 p.m. Thank you." He said it slower. He paused between phrases. He made space for the words to breathe. The next day, something surprising happened. A guest smiled at him and said, "Thank you for explaining so clearly. You're very professional." He felt his chest rise with quiet pride because he had discovered something powerful. Confidence isn't about how fast you speak. It's about how sure you sound. Even if your English is simple. You see, many English learners believe they need to speak quickly to sound fluent. They try to speak like native speakers, racing through words. But speed is not the goal. Clarity is. Confident people don't rush their words. They let each sentence land. They let each idea breathe. It's not about using big words. It's about using your voice with intention. There's another story I want to share. A woman was invited to give a speech at her child's school. English was not her first language. She had prepared her notes, practiced every sentence. But when she stood on stage, she felt her heart racing. Her throat tightened. She looked at the crowd and began. At first, she spoke too fast. Her words were tangled together. Then, her eyes caught her child's gaze. Calm. Trusting. She took a deep breath, and she slowed down. Her voice softened. Her pace became steady. And suddenly, the whole room leaned in. When she finished, people clapped. Not because her English was perfect, but because her words had power. Her voice carried belief, and belief is what confidence sounds like. So how can you speak with a calm, steady voice, even when you're nervous? Here's a little technique. Pause on purpose. Try this. Before you begin speaking, take one silent breath. Before each new sentence, leave a small space. Before you answer a question, give yourself 2 seconds. These tiny pauses change everything. They give your brain time to think. They give your words time to land. And they give your listener time to trust you. Because when you're calm, you invite calm in others. There was a young teacher who had just started teaching English to children. The kids were loud, excited, full of energy. The teacher tried to raise her voice louder and louder, but it didn't help. The more she shouted, the more they shouted too. One day her mentor told her something surprising. When you lower your voice, they'll listen more. She didn't believe it at first. But she tried. Instead of shouting, she began speaking slowly, gently. And something magical happened. The children leaned in. They became quiet, curious, attentive. Not because the teacher became louder, but because she became clearer. That's what confident people know. The power of your voice isn't in its volume. It's in its presence. Another way to steady your voice is to connect it with your breath. When you're nervous, your breath becomes shallow. When you're stressed, your voice rises. But when you breathe deeply, your voice settles. Practice this before a presentation, before a conversation, before answering a question. Breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 2, and breathe out slowly. Do this 3 times. You'll feel your body shift, and your voice will follow, because your voice lives in your body, and when your body is calm, your voice becomes strong. Let's reflect for a moment. Think about the most confident voice you've ever heard. Maybe it was a teacher, maybe a speaker on YouTube, maybe your grandmother, maybe a quiet child who told a story with deep meaning. What made that voice powerful? It wasn't just the words, it was the feeling behind the words. It was the calm truth in their delivery. That's what you're building now. A voice that reflects your strength, not your fear. A voice that shows confidence, even when your heart is racing. Here's another story. There was a man who worked as a security guard at a university. One day, a student who was struggling with depression stopped near the gate, looking lost. The guard didn't say much. He didn't give advice. He just said, "You okay?" The student nodded slowly, and tears filled his eyes. The guard sat down next to him and said nothing for a while. Then, in a steady, soft voice, he said, "You're not alone. You're stronger than you think. Take your time. That moment changed the student's life, not because the guard had the perfect words, but because he delivered them with peace, with presence, with human confidence, the kind that says, I see you and I care. This is what a confident voice does. It doesn't try to impress. It tries to connect. It doesn't try to be perfect. It tries to be real. So if you're learning English, remember this. You don't need to speak fast. You don't need to use complex words. You don't need to sound like anyone else. You only need to slow down and speak with heart. Because when your voice is steady, your message becomes unforgettable. You are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to breathe between words. You are allowed to speak gently and still be powerful. In fact, that's what confidence truly is. So the next time you speak, whether it's in English or your native language, let your voice rise from a calm place. A place of knowing, a place of peace. Speak not to fill space, but to offer value. Speak not to prove yourself, but to be yourself. And as you do, your confidence will grow one word at a time. Because confidence doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks softly, and that soft voice can move the world. Habit 3. They don't feel the need to brag. There's a special kind of confidence that doesn't need attention. It doesn't ask for applause. It doesn't chase praise. It simply walks through life, quietly strong. This is the kind of confidence that doesn't brag. It doesn't say, look at me. It says, I know who I am, whether you see me or not. That is a power most people never learn. But when you do, it changes everything. Let me tell you about a man named Daniel. He worked as a janitor at a busy office building. Every morning before anyone else arrived, he cleaned the floors, wiped down the desks, and made sure everything was ready for the day. He rarely spoke, unless someone greeted him. He didn't wear flashy clothes. He didn't post online about how hard he worked. But everyone in that building respected him. Why? Because his actions spoke louder than any words. One evening, a pipe burst on the third floor. Water flooded the hall. Most people were gone, but Daniel stayed. He worked for hours with buckets, towels, and tools, alone. The next day, when employees returned, everything looked perfect. Dry floors, clean carpets, safe wiring. Someone asked, "Who fixed all this?" Daniel simply said, "I didn't want you to slip. No bragging, no drama. Just quiet excellence. That's confidence. Not the kind that needs to be seen, but the kind that shines, even in silence." Many people believe confidence means being the loudest person in the room, the one with the biggest stories, the fanciest job title, the most expensive clothes. But true confidence doesn't scream. It doesn't need to be admired. It just needs to be real. There was a girl named Sophia. She had a gift for drawing. In school, while others talked loudly about their talents, Sophia stayed quiet. One day during art class, the teacher asked students to draw something that represented their dream. Most kids drew cars, castles, or superheroes. Sophia drew a small tree, growing between cracks in a sidewalk, with sunlight shining gently on it. When the teacher saw her drawing, she paused, then said, "This is powerful." Other students looked over. Some asked, "Why didn't you tell us you could draw like that?" Sophia smiled and said, "I like letting the drawing speak for me." That's the kind of confidence that inspires people, not because it demands attention, but because it earns respect. Here's the truth. People who are always trying to prove their worth often feel empty inside. They shout because they're afraid of being overlooked. They brag because they don't believe their quiet value is enough. But confident people, they know their worth. They don't need to broadcast it, because the more secure you are, the less you need to be seen. There's a powerful quote: "Confidence is silent, insecurity is loud." Let that sit for a moment. Think about the last time someone bragged in front of you. Did it inspire you, or did it feel uncomfortable? Now think about someone who did something excellent, without ever needing to talk about it. That's the person you remember. That's the person you trust. Because trust is built on humility, not self-promotion. If you're learning English, you may sometimes feel the need to prove yourself, to show off your vocabulary, to use big words, to say, "Look, I can do it." And yes, celebrate your growth. Be proud of your progress. But remember this: your English is not a performance. It's a bridge, a connection. It's not about being better than others. It's about being real with others. Let's talk about what confident people do instead of bragging. They let their actions speak. They let others talk about their success. They focus on helping, not impressing. They give credit freely. They stay curious, always learning, never boasting. And most importantly, they live with quiet dignity. That's a rare kind of power. A young man once got his dream job at a marketing company. On his first day, during team introductions, each person shared their achievements. Some talked about degrees. Others shared awards. One even pulled up his LinkedIn on the screen. When it was the young man's turn, he simply said, "I'm excited to learn from all of you. I may not know everything, but I'm here to grow and give my best." The room was silent. Then the team leader said, "That's the most confident thing I've heard all morning." You see, real confidence is not about showing off what you know. It's about being honest about what you're willing to learn. There's a beautiful story of an elderly farmer who once received an award for best contribution to community health. He didn't have a degree. He wasn't a doctor. He had just planted trees along the village path every year for 30 years. Trees that gave shade, that stopped floods, that bore fruit. When asked to speak at the award ceremony, he said, "I didn't do much, just gave back to the land that gave me life." That was it. The crowd stood and clapped, not because of his words, but because of his heart. That is confidence. It is humble, it is generous, and it is powerful. So how do you practice this kind of confidence? Here are some simple reminders. Let your work speak for itself. If someone compliments you, smile and say thank you, not "I know." When you succeed, remember who helped you and share the spotlight. When others talk, listen. Don't wait to interrupt with your story. If you feel tempted to prove yourself, pause and ask, who am I trying to impress? And why? When you why, begin to trust your own value. You won't need the world to clap because the quiet inside you will become louder than any praise outside you. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more presence, more grace, more grounded people who don't need to say, look at me. Instead, they say, let me help you. That is the language of real power, and that is what you're learning now. So walk through your day with this quiet truth. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to chase applause. You don't need to brag. You just need to show up, do your work, and let your light shine, gently but unmistakably. Because true confidence doesn't ask for attention. It gives attention. It lifts others. It serves quietly. And in the end, it's the quiet ones who are remembered the most. Habit 4. They. Listen more than they speak. There's something powerful about being heard. Have you ever spoken to someone who made you feel truly listened to? Someone who wasn't checking their phone, who wasn't thinking of what to say next, who simply gave you their full attention. You walked away feeling lighter, stronger, understood. Now let me ask you something harder. Have you ever been that person, the one who really listens? Because confident people don't just talk with purpose. They listen with purpose. They know this secret. Listening is not weakness. It's a superpower. There's a story of a man named Min who worked at a small auto repair shop. He wasn't the boss. He didn't have a fancy degree. But everyone, from customers to co-workers, trusted him. Why? Because Min had a habit most people didn't. He listened. When customers spoke, he didn't interrupt. When co-workers complained, he didn't try to fix it right away. He just listened, fully and calmly. One day, a new employee asked him, "Why? Don't you speak much?" Min smiled and said, "I already know what I know. I listen to learn what I don't." That's the quiet brilliance of confident people. They don't feel the need to dominate conversations. They know that listening is how you connect. It's how you lead. It's how you grow. In school, we're taught how to speak. We learn grammar, vocabulary, public speaking, but very few are taught how to listen. And yet, the people who lead the best conversations are not the best talkers. They're the best listeners. Because when you listen, you give people the greatest gift you can offer, your presence. There was a girl named Lila who struggled with making friends. She was kind, thoughtful, but in conversations, she always tried too hard. She interrupted. She talked about herself too much. She feared silence, so she filled it with words. One day, a teacher noticed and gave her this advice. Try this. Next time you're with someone, ask one question, and then listen without interrupting. Let them talk. Stay curious. Lila tried it at lunch. She asked her classmate, "What do you love doing after school?" And then she stayed silent. Her classmate opened up, talked about her love for baking, for her grandma's recipes, for her dream of opening a small bakery one day. When they finished talking, her classmate smiled and said, "Thanks. I've never really shared that before." Lila realized something. When you stop trying to impress, You create space for others to express, and in that space, friendships grow. So how do confident people listen? They listen with their body. They face the person. They look into their eyes. They nod gently, showing I'm with you. They listen with their mind. They don't prepare a response while the other person is talking. They don't judge. They don't assume. They listen with their heart. They care. They hold space. They remember. And when they respond, it's not to steal the spotlight, but to build a bridge. That's what makes a conversation feel like home. In the world of business, there's a story about a CEO who was known for asking very few questions, but making brilliant decisions. When asked about his secret, he said, "I ask a lot of questions. I just don't rush the answers," he explained. That people reveal the most, not when they're interrupted, but when they're given room to unfold. He once said, "People speak in layers. The first layer is surface. The second is reason. The third is truth." If you interrupt them before the third, you'll never know who they are. Confident people wait for the third layer. They know real understanding takes time. As an English learner, listening is your greatest teacher. Listen not just to words, but to rhythm, to tone, to pauses, to what is said and what is not said. You will learn more by listening to 10 conversations than by talking through 50. Because listening is how language becomes part of you. But beyond language, listening is how trust is built. If you want people to open their heart, you must quiet your own. There's an elderly woman who lives alone near the market. Every week, a young man delivers her groceries. At first, he would just say hello and leave. But one day, he asked, "How are you?" She looked surprised. Then she said, "Would you like to sit for tea?" He stayed for 10 minutes. She talked about her garden, her childhood, her late husband. Every week after that, they shared 10 minutes of tea and conversation. One day she told him, "You're the first person who's really listened to me in years." He hadn't said much. He had just listened. That's when he realized being heard is a kind of healing, and offering that space is a kind of service. Listening doesn't mean silence only. It means patience. It means respect. It means tuning in to what matters to the other person. It's not easy. You will want to speak. You will want to give advice. You will want to prove you understand. But confident people wait. They don't need to prove anything. They know that being present is more powerful than being right. So, here are a few things you can try today. Ask someone a meaningful question and listen without interrupting. When someone speaks, look into their eyes and nod gently. If you don't understand everything, ask them to explain and show that you care. Pause before you respond. Let their words settle. Resist the urge to talk about yourself right away. Give them the space to finish, and most of all, value what they're sharing, because every person wants to be heard, and when you become the person who truly listens, you become the person others remember. In a noisy world, the quiet listener is the one people trust. In a world of shouting, The gentle ear is where healing begins. And in a world chasing attention, the one who listens becomes the one who leads. So don't be afraid to speak less. When you listen more, you speak volumes. Because true confidence doesn't interrupt, it invites, it holds, and it understands. Habit 5. They aren't afraid to say, "I don't know." There's a moment that makes most people nervous. It's the moment when someone asks you a question, and you don't know the answer. Your stomach tightens. Your heart beats faster. You feel like you should say something, anything, to avoid looking weak. But confident people do something different. They say calmly and clearly, "I don't know." Not with shame, not with fear, not with apology, just truth. Because saying, "I don't know," isn't weakness. It's wisdom. Let me tell you a story. There was a young doctor, just starting her first year in a hospital. She was smart, ambitious, and deeply afraid of making mistakes. During rounds, a senior doctor asked her a difficult question about a rare condition. She froze. She had no idea. She could have guessed. She could have nodded, pretending. She could have changed the subject. But instead, she said, "I'm not sure, but I'd like to find out." The senior doctor smiled and said, "That's the best answer I've heard all day." That moment taught her something she never forgot. Confidence is not about always knowing. It's about being open to learning. Many people believe that not knowing something makes them look small. So they pretend, they guess, they bluff. But people can feel the difference. And pretending to know, it's the fastest way to lose trust. Because when you fake confidence, it always cracks. But when you say, "I don't know," with humility and strength, you earn respect. There's a story about a child who asked her grandfather a question about the stars. "Grandpa, why do they twinkle?" The old man looked up and said, "I don't know, but let's learn together." So they went inside, opened an old book, looked online, watched a video, and after 30 minutes, they both understood, more than before. But what really mattered wasn't the answer. It was the journey, the honesty, the shared curiosity. That's what confident people do. They invite others into discovery. They don't close the door with fake answers. They open the door with real curiosity. Let's reflect. Think about the people you admire. Are they always right? Or are they open, curious, eager to ask good questions? True leaders don't pretend. They say things like, "I'll check on that. Let me learn more. That's not my area of expertise. Can you help me understand it better?" Because strong people aren't afraid to admit they're still growing. There was a young woman who worked in a restaurant. One evening, a customer asked about an ingredient in a dish. She didn't know the answer. She paused and said, "I'm not sure. I'll ask the chef and get back to you." She returned a few minutes later with a confident answer, and the customer smiled. Another server had overheard and said, "Why didn't you just guess?" "That's what most people do." She replied, "Because I'd rather be honest than wrong." That's confidence. Confidence that doesn't fear the unknown. Confidence that respects others. Confidence that stays humble and keeps learning. Now, let's talk about English learning. So many learners are afraid of making mistakes, of saying the wrong word, of looking silly, so they avoid speaking, or they pretend to understand, or they nod without asking. But what if you just said, "I don't understand"? Can you explain that again? I've never heard that word before. You'd learn faster. You'd feel freer. And people would admire your honesty. Because English isn't about perfection. It's about progress. And progress comes from saying, "I don't know, yet." Here's a small exercise. Next time someone says something you don't understand, don't nod. Pause. Look them in the eye and say, "That's new for me. Could you explain it another way?" Or, "I'm still learning English, but I want to understand you better." Most people will slow down. They'll repeat. They'll appreciate your effort. Because you didn't fake understanding. You reached for real connection. There's another story. In a village, a carpenter was known for his skill. People would come from far away to ask for advice. One day, a young man asked him about a complicated design. The carpenter said, "I've never done that before, but I'm willing to try." The young man was surprised. "You're the best in the region. Don't you know everything?" The carpenter smiled. "The day I know everything, I stop growing." That's a mindset we can all learn from. So how do you build the habit of saying "I don't know" with confidence? Start small. When you're unsure, say it. When you're curious, ask it. When you need help, request it. You will be surprised by how much people respect your honesty. More importantly, you'll feel lighter, because pretending is heavy, but truth is light. And here's a beautiful result of this habit. When you admit what you don't know, people trust what you do say, because your words are real. Your confidence is honest. Your learning is alive. So don't be afraid of blank spaces in your knowledge. They are not failures. They are invitations. Invitations to grow, to learn, to connect. Let's end this reflection with one quiet truth. You don't need to know everything. No one does. What you need is the courage to say, "I don't know, but I'm open to learning." That is the voice of a confident person, a person not afraid of questions, not afraid of growth, not afraid of being human. And the more often you say those simple words, the more powerful they become. Because "I don't know" isn't the end. It's the beginning. Habit 6. They don't need validation from others. There. It's a kind of freedom that many people never taste. It's the freedom to be yourself, fully, without waiting for someone else to approve. Most people spend their lives chasing validation. They post something online and check how many likes it gets. They wear certain clothes, hoping others will notice. They say things, not because they believe them, but because they want to fit in. But confident people walk a different path. They still care about people. They still value kindness and connection, but they don't depend on approval. They know their worth, even when no one is watching. There's a story of a young man named Elias. He worked at a cafe, brewing coffee and cleaning tables. Every day, a group of office workers came in. They laughed loudly, wore expensive suits, and often made fun of others behind their backs. One day, they mocked Elias's shoes. "Still wearing those old things?" one of them joked. Elias smiled and said, "They've walked me through a lot." And he walked away, head high, heart calm. Later that week, a woman who had seen the exchange pulled Elias aside. She said, "I admire how you carry yourself. You don't let them get to you." Elias said something simple, something unforgettable. "I don't need them to like me. I just need to like who I am. That's confidence. When you seek approval from everyone, you give away your power. You shape your words to please. You shrink your dreams to avoid judgment. You pretend just to feel accepted. But real confidence is built from the inside out. It's not about what others say, it's about what you believe. And when you stop begging for validation, you begin to live in your truth. There's a girl named Hannah who loved painting, but her friends weren't artists. They told her it was a waste of time. "You'll never make money with that," they said. "Be realistic." For a while she stopped. She put her brushes away. She stopped drawing. She tried to do what everyone else thought was practical. But she felt empty. One night she found an old sketchbook. She opened it. Page by page, her heart came alive again. So she began painting in secret. At night, when the world was quiet, she posted her art anonymously online. No name, no face, just her heart. Months later, one of her pieces went viral. People from around the world wrote messages. "This made me cry. This looks like my dream. I felt peace when I saw this." That's when she realized something important. You don't need everyone to approve. You just need to stay true. And sometimes, when you stop trying to be accepted, you finally begin to shine. Let's talk about language. When you're learning English, it's easy to feel insecure. You wonder, did I say that right? Do I sound stupid? Are they judging my accent? But here's what confident learners do. They speak anyway, not perfectly, not always fluently, but honestly, bravely. Because they're not speaking to impress. They're speaking to express. And they don't wait for applause. They keep going, even if no one claps. There was a man who wanted to become a public speaker. But every time he posted a video online, he'd get only a few views. No comments, no likes. No one seemed to care. After 6 months, he felt discouraged. He thought about quitting. But one day, a message came in. It said, "Your last video helped me get through a panic attack. Thank you." Just one message, that's all he needed to keep going. Because validation isn't measured in numbers. It's measured in impact, and often, you won't even see the lives you touch. So don't stop just because the crowd is quiet. Keep speaking. Keep showing up. Keep being who you are. Confident people don't change themselves just to be liked. They don't follow trends they don't believe in. They don't hide their truth just to avoid criticism. They live by this rule. I'd rather be rejected for being real than loved for being fake, because approval fades. But self-respect, that stays. So how do you practice this habit? Start by noticing your own need for validation. Before you speak, ask, am I saying this because it's true or because I want them to like me? Before you post something, ask, would I still do this if no one clapped? Before you follow a crowd, ask, Is this me? Or is this just what's popular? These questions don't make you selfish. They make you strong, because every time you choose authenticity over approval, your confidence grows. There's a woman who runs a small fruit stall in a busy city. She wears simple clothes. She greets everyone with kindness. She doesn't care about looking trendy, but people line up at her stall, not just for the fruit. They come for her because she radiates peace. She treats people with warmth. She never chases attention. But attention comes to her. That's the quiet magnetism of someone who doesn't need validation. Here's the secret. When you stop trying to be liked, you become lovable in a deeper way. People are drawn to honesty, to calm, to quiet confidence. And the moment you no longer need approval, you begin to attract real respect. Not because you asked for it, but because you earned it. So speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. Wear what makes you feel alive, not what others expect. Pursue the dream that calls your heart, even if no one else understands. Because your life is yours. You're not here to be everyone's favorite. You're here to become your full self. And when you do that, you give the world something far more powerful than approval. You give them you. Habit 7. They embrace challenges and failures. Most people try to avoid failure. They hide from mistakes. They run from discomfort. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect path, before they act. But confident people don't wait for perfect. They move forward, even when it's hard, even when they fall. Because they understand one thing: confidence isn't the absence of failure. It's the relationship you have with failure. And the most confident people, they embrace challenges. They welcome mistakes. They see setbacks as steps. Let me tell you about a woman named Miriam. She dreamed of opening a bakery, but she had no money, no business background, no support. She started small, baking cookies at night and selling them in the morning market. The first month, almost no one bought them. Some were too sweet, some were too dry. People complained. One man even said, "This is the worst cookie I've ever had." She went home, hurt, ashamed, ready to give up. But instead of quitting, she asked that man, "What didn't you like about it?" He looked surprised. She said, "I'm trying to learn." He gave her honest feedback. She took notes. She adjusted. Week by week, her cookies got better. 1 year later, her stall had a line down the block. 3 years later, she opened her first shop. 5 years later, she trained young women in baking and business. She wasn't confident because she succeeded right away. She was confident because she kept going when she didn't. Here's the truth. Everyone fails, even the best, even the smartest, even the strongest. The difference is, confident people don't make failure mean something about their worth. They don't say, "I failed, so I'm a failure." They say, "I failed, so I'm learning." And that mindset changes everything. Think of a baby learning to walk. They fall again and again. Sometimes they cry, sometimes they laugh, but they never say, "Maybe walking isn't for me." They keep going. Why? Because they haven't learned shame yet. They haven't learned fear yet. But as we grow older, we do. We're taught to hide our mistakes. to protect our pride, to avoid looking foolish. But confidence means unlearning that fear. It means remembering that falling is part of the process. There was a teacher who used to write the word fail on the board. Then she'd write first A, attempt I, in L, learning. She told her students, if you're not failing, you're not growing. One student said, but I hate getting things wrong. She replied, then you'll hate every important thing you ever try, because anything worth doing will include mistakes. There's a story of a man who wanted to learn English. He was in his 50s. He felt too old, too embarrassed, too far behind. At his first class, the teacher asked a simple question. He answered, and everyone laughed. He didn't speak for the rest of the class, but the next week, he came back. The teacher noticed, and after class, she asked why. He said, if I only show up when I feel strong, I'll never become strong. So he kept coming, one word at a time, one mistake at a time, one small win at a time, and within 2 years, he gave a public speech in English, thanking his teacher. The audience clapped, not because he was perfect, but because he was brave. That's the power of embracing challenge. It teaches you how to keep going, how to rise after falling, how to speak after silence. Here's a truth you can hold on to. Confidence is not built in comfort. It's built in friction. It's built in the moments when everything goes wrong, and you try again anyway. Every confident person you see today was once unsure, once afraid, once full of doubt, but they walked through their fear. And you can too. If you're learning something, a language, a skill, a job, allow yourself to get it wrong. Speak English even if your grammar isn't perfect. Try even when you feel nervous. Make mistakes and learn from them. Because every time you fail forward, you grow upward. Here are 3 things confident people believe. Mistakes are part of mastery. You can't get it right without first getting it wrong. Setbacks are setups for comebacks. Every delay is a lesson in disguise. Growth begins at the edge of comfort. The moment you feel uncomfortable is the moment you begin to stretch. Let me share one more story. There was a boy named Jonah who loved singing, but when he sang in front of his class, they laughed. He stopped singing for 5 years. Then one day he heard a street performer playing his favorite song. He stood nearby, softly singing along. The singer noticed and said, "You've got a voice. Want to sing this next verse with me?" Jonah froze. But then he remembered how it felt to hide. He remembered how it felt to shrink. So he nodded. They sang together. His voice shook, but it came out. And when they finished, people clapped. He said later, "That was the scariest and most beautiful moment of my life. Not because he sang perfectly, but because he showed up." That's the kind of courage confident people live by. So whatever challenge you're facing today, step toward it, not away, toward. If you fall, get back up. If you fail, learn the lesson. If it hurts, heal. Then try again. Because confidence isn't about being untouched by life, it's about being undefeated by it. You are stronger than your mistakes, smarter than your worst moments, and braver than you believe. So keep walking, keep stretching, keep rising, and remember, every time you fail forward, you're not going backward. You're building the kind of confidence that no one can take away. Habit 8. They practice active listening. There's a difference between hearing and listening. You can hear noise. You can hear words. You can hear someone talking without really understanding them. But when you listen, truly listen, something powerful happens. You create space. You build trust. You connect on a human level, and that's exactly what confident people do. They don't just wait for their turn to speak. They listen with their full attention. Because confident people know your voice is powerful, but your ears can be even more powerful. There's a story of a boy named Leo who was quiet. In a classroom full of loud voices, he didn't say much. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't try to impress, but one day a classmate came to him and said, "Leo, I like talking to you." Leo was surprised. "Why?" he asked. "I barely say anything." And the classmate smiled and said, "Exactly. You actually listen. You don't just wait to talk. You make me feel safe." That day, Leo realized something deep. You don't always need the right words. Sometimes the best gift you can offer is your attention. So what is active listening? It's not just hearing someone, it's showing with your body, your eyes, your silence, that you're present, that you care, that you're not just filling space, you're sharing it. Here's what active listening looks like. You turn toward the person. You make soft eye contact. You nod gently to show you're following. You don't interrupt. You don't rush to. Give advice. And when they finish speaking, you pause. You reflect. You respond with empathy. This is what creates real connection. And connection is what confidence is built on. There's a woman named Sarah who leads a small team at work. She's not the loudest. She's not the most experienced. But everyone respects her. Why? Because when her team speaks, she listens. She doesn't pretend to know everything. She asks questions. She remembers names. She reflects their feelings back to them. And because she listens with care, her team follows her with trust. That's leadership. And it starts with the ears. Think about the people in your life. Who are the ones you feel safe with? Who are the ones you go to when you need to talk? Chances are, they're the ones who listen well, not the ones who talk the most, not the ones who try to fix everything, but the ones who stay present. That's the kind of person you can be. That's the kind of confidence you can build, not by speaking louder, but by listening deeper. Here's an example from language learning. Many English learners think confidence means speaking as much as possible, talking non-stop, never pausing. But the truth is, listening is how you grow. When you listen to native speakers, you learn pronunciation, you learn rhythm, you learn real expressions. And when you listen actively in conversation, you build deeper relationships. Because the person across from you doesn't want perfect grammar. They want to feel heard. So if your English is still improving, don't be afraid to listen more. Your silence is not weakness. It's strength. There was a man named Ravi who wanted to improve his English speaking. But instead of jumping into conversations right away, he decided to watch. He went to cafes and just observed how people greeted each other, how they responded, what words they used when ordering coffee, how they expressed thanks. Every day he took notes, like a student of life. Then one day, someone accidentally bumped into him at a table. The stranger said, "Sorry, you okay?" Ravi smiled and said, "I'm okay, thank you." The man said, "Your English is good." Ravi replied, "Because I listened a lot." Listening had become his secret tool, and it worked. There's another side to active listening. It's not just about understanding words. It's about hearing emotions. When someone says, "I'm fine," but their voice sounds tired, an active listener notices. When someone says, "I don't need help," but they pause too long, an active listener senses something deeper, and when you respond with kindness, not advice, you build trust. That's emotional intelligence and confident. People have it, not because they're perfect, but because they pay attention. Here are 5 powerful things confident people say when they listen actively. Tell me more. That sounds difficult. How are you really feeling? I hear you. Would you like me to just listen, or would? You like advice? Thanks for sharing that with me. These phrases are not fancy, but they are human. And being human, being warm, open, and present, is the heart of real confidence. There was an old man who sat on the same bench every evening. People often stopped to talk to him. He didn't say much. He just listened. One woman who spoke to him often said, "You're the best conversation I have all week, and you barely say anything." He smiled and said, "People don't need answers. They need presence. That's what confident listeners know. You don't always have to fix. You don't always have to solve. You just have to care. And caring begins with listening. If you want to practice this habit, try these simple steps today. Put your phone down when someone is talking. Give people your eyes. Don't interrupt, even if you're excited. Ask one more question, instead of giving your opinion. Repeat back what you heard, to make sure you understood. Show empathy, not judgment. And most of all, listen not just to respond. Listen to understand. Because every time you do, you build trust, you deepen connection, you become someone people feel safe with. And in a world full of noise, that is a quiet, beautiful strength. It's also about hearing the real thing. So open your ears. Open your heart and listen with everything you've got. You'll be amazed by how much you grow simply by staying present. Habit 9. They network strategically. When you hear the word networking, what comes to mind? Some people imagine business cards, formal handshakes, and awkward small talk at events. Others think of competition, trying to get close to people who have power. But confident people see networking differently. They don't build relationships just to take. They build relationships to grow, to learn, to support, to share, and most importantly, to build meaningful connections that last. That's strategic networking. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. There's a man named Sato who worked as a mechanic in a small town. He wasn't rich, he didn't go to college, but he was curious and kind. Whenever he met a customer, he asked about their work. If they were a teacher, he'd ask about what kids struggle with. If they were a nurse, he'd ask about night shifts. If they were a shop owner, he'd ask about pricing and supplies. He didn't do it to collect favors. He did it because he loved learning about people. Over time, something interesting happened. When he needed help fixing a tool, a local engineer stepped in. When his nephew needed tutoring, a retired teacher offered it for free. When a new family moved into town, people said, "Go see Sato, he knows everyone." That's the result of genuine connection. He didn't chase influence. He created trust. And that's what confident people do. You don't need to be in a big city. You don't need to wear a suit. You don't need to know all the right words. You only need to care, to listen, to show up with honesty and curiosity. That's where real networking begins. There was a woman named Theda who worked at a clothing stall in a busy market. Every morning, she'd smile at her neighbors. She remembered their birthdays. She shared fruit during hot days. She offered help when others packed up late. One day, a fire damaged her stall. She lost almost everything. But within 2 hours, 5 nearby sellers came with boxes and cloth to help her restart. She didn't ask. She didn't beg. Her network, her quiet web of relationships, showed up for her because she had planted seeds long before the storm. That's the lesson. Confident people don't wait for disaster to build connection. They start early. They give first. They invest in relationships without keeping score because they know when you build people, those people build you back. Let's bring this into your English learning journey. Networking is one of the best ways to improve your English. When you build friendships with English speakers, when you join groups, classes, or communities, when you ask questions and share your story, you don't just learn vocabulary, you learn confidence. And you don't just learn language, you build bridges. There was a young man learning English online. He was shy. He rarely spoke, but he joined a small English learning group. Instead of trying to talk a lot, he did one thing every week. He asked a good question. What helped you overcome your fear of speaking? What do you do when you forget a word in the middle of a sentence? What's one English phrase you use every day? Others started noticing him. They began replying. They invited him into deeper conversations. And slowly, word by word, his confidence grew. Not because he forced his way in, but because he showed genuine interest. That's what strategic networking is. It's not pushing your voice louder. It's positioning your heart closer. Here are 5 habits confident people use to network effectively. They show up consistently. Even if it's just once a week, they stay present. They give more than they take. They share knowledge, celebrate others. Offer help. They follow up. A simple message. Thanks for today's chat. I learned something valuable. That one message can build trust. They stay authentic. They don't pretend to be more experienced. They share honestly where they are. They build slowly. They're patient. They focus on trust, not just quick results. Let's take a moment to imagine this. You're standing at a crossroads in life. In one direction, you go alone. You work hard. You try your best. But every mistake hits harder because no one is walking beside you. In the other direction, you walk with a small group. Some are ahead of you. Some are beside you. Some are still learning, like you. But when you fall, someone holds out a hand. When you forget something, someone reminds you. When you feel tired, someone says, "Keep going. I believe in you." That is the power of building the right people around you. And it's not too late to begin. There's a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Confidence grows faster when you stop isolating yourself. When you open your world, when you learn from others, when you let people in, even if it's just one conversation a week, one question a day, one connection per month. That's how your future network starts, one step at a time. And don't forget this. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. You don't need to speak perfect English. You don't need a big audience. I just need presence, curiosity, kindness. When you combine those three, you become unforgettable. So today, take a small step. Message someone in your English class. Ask a question in a group chat. Send thanks to someone whose words inspired you. Offer help where it's needed. Smile first, speak second. Stay real, always, and over time your network will grow, not just wide, but deep. And that kind of network, it doesn't just help you succeed, it helps you become. Habit 10. They reflect and adjust. Confident people are not perfect. They don't always say the right thing. They don't always make the right choice. They don't always get it right on the first try. But there's something they do that makes all the difference. They reflect and they adjust. They look back, not to blame, but to learn. They look within, not to punish, but to grow. Because confidence isn't about always being right. It's about being willing to change when you've been wrong. There's a story of a teacher named Ms. Elena. She had been teaching for years. Her students liked her. Her lessons were organized. But one year, a student gave her some unexpected feedback. He said, "You explain things very fast. I try to follow, but I get lost." At first, she felt offended. "I've been doing this for years," she thought. "No one else ever said that." But that night, she sat down quietly and reflected. What if I really have been going too fast? What if I've gotten too used to my way? The next day, she changed her method. She slowed down. She used more examples. She asked more questions. The same student smiled and said, "Now I understand." That's the power of reflection. It's not about shame. It's about alignment. Realigning your actions with your purpose. Most people avoid self-reflection. It feels uncomfortable. It forces you to admit mistakes. It shows you things you might not want to see. But confident people know growth lives on the other side of honesty. So they ask questions like, what went well today? What could I have done differently? Did I listen fully? Did I speak from truth? Did I treat others with respect and myself with kindness? They use reflection as a mirror, not to judge, but to understand. There was a man named Joel who gave a speech at a local event. He had practiced for weeks, but when he stood on stage, he rushed. He forgot key points. He fumbled his words. He went home feeling embarrassed, but instead of saying, I'm not good at public speaking. He sat down and asked, "What happened?" He wrote down, "I was nervous. I skipped my opening story. I forgot to breathe. I didn't connect with the audience." Then he wrote, "Next time I'll arrive earlier. I'll start with something personal. I'll practice breathing during rehearsal." 1 month later, he spoke again, and this time, he shined. Not because he was perfect, but because he reflected and adjusted. Here's something powerful to remember. Confidence doesn't come from never falling. It comes from knowing how to rise better next time. And you can only rise better when you stop and study the fall. In your English journey, reflection is gold. Instead of saying, "I spoke badly today," ask, "What did I say well? What words made me pause? What helped me feel calm? What made me nervous?" Every conversation is feedback. Every mistake is a message, but only if you listen to it. There's a woman named Nadia who used to journal at night, not about her feelings, but about her English. She'd write, 3 words I learned today, 1 phrase I want to use next time, 1 thing I did well, 1 thing I'll try differently tomorrow. It took 5 minutes, but it changed everything because she started seeing progress. She started feeling ownership. She wasn't just practicing English. She was sculpting it, mindfully, daily. Confident people do this in all areas of life. They pause, they check in, they ask, "Is this still who I want to be? Is this still the right path for me? What am I learning from this season?" Because confidence is not stubbornness. It's flexibility with wisdom. It's having a strong foundation, but open doors. There was an athlete who trained hard every day, but she kept getting injured. She pushed through thinking, "Real champions never quit." Until one day, her coach said, "Champions don't just push. They pause, reflect, and adjust." That moment shifted everything. She changed her schedule. She improved her recovery. She started listening to her body, and she didn't just stay in the game. She won. Not because she did more, but because she did it wiser. Reflection doesn't always need a journal. It can be quiet moments on a walk, a conversation with a mentor, a deep breath before bed. But make it a habit. Because every time you reflect, you collect a little more wisdom. And when you act on that wisdom, you become unstoppable. So here's something you can do right now. Take one area of your life. Maybe your English speaking, your health, your relationships, your mindset, and ask, what's working well? What's holding me back? What can I do differently starting today? Just one small shift, and then take action. That's the magic of adjustment. It's not dramatic. It's not noisy, but it's powerful. Because small changes create big results over time. Confident people grow not because they're lucky, but because they learn fast. And how do they learn fast? They reflect, and they adjust every week, every day, every time they fall short. And that's what keeps them moving forward, stronger, wiser, and more whole. So if you want to build lasting confidence, don't just look outside, look within. You'll find the answers you need. You'll find patterns that no one else can see. and you'll discover power you didn't know you had. Because self-awareness is self-respect, and self-respect is the root of confidence. Habits of highly confident people, you've made it to the end of a journey into the heart of real confidence. Not the kind that shouts, not the kind that shows off, but the kind that stays, even when the world gets loud. You've just explored 10 powerful habits, 10 ways of moving through life that change how you feel, how you connect, and how you rise. And now let's look back, slowly with heart, and remember what each one truly means. Habit 1. Maintain eye contact. Because when you meet someone's eyes, you don't just see them, you show them who you are, not afraid, not hiding, present. Habit 2. Speak with a steady, calm voice. Because your strength doesn't need speed or volume. It just needs clarity. It just needs your breath. Your calm presence is your greatest message. Habit 3. Don't brag. Because your value doesn't need to be shouted. It lives in your actions. Your humility speaks louder than your pride ever could. Habit 4. Listen more than you speak. Because when you listen deeply, people trust you. They open up. They remember you. You don't always need answers. You just need presence. Habit 5. Say, I don't know without fear. Because honesty is braver than pretending, and growth begins the moment you admit, I'm still learning. Habit 6. Don't seek validation from others. Because your worth isn't decided by applause. It's already inside you, and when you stop chasing approval, you begin walking in freedom. Habit 7. Embrace challenges and failures. Because falling isn't the end, it's a new step, and every challenge is just a chance for you to become stronger. Habit 8. Practice active listening. Because real connection isn't found in what you say, it's found in what you hear, what you hold, what you understand without interrupting. Habit 9. Network strategically. Because the right people don't just help you grow, they walk with you. They lift you. They remind you who you are even when you forget. Habit 10. Reflect and adjust. Because confidence is a moving river, not a frozen mountain. You grow, you shift, you pause, and you rise again, stronger, wiser, and more aware. Now, pause. Breathe. Let these words settle in your body, not just in your mind, but in your spirit. Because you're not just learning how to be confident. You're remembering who you already are. You're the person who kept listening, who stayed until the end, who cared enough to grow. That is confidence already living in you. You don't need to rush into changing everything at once. You don't need to master all 10 habits today. Just choose one. One habit to begin practicing this week. Maybe it's eye contact. Maybe it's slowing down when you speak. Maybe it's writing one reflection each night before bed. Just start. Small steps. Daily effort. Quiet commitment. That's how confidence grows. Not in sudden leaps, but in quiet, steady roots. And always remember, you don't need to be confident to start. You build confidence by starting. Every time you show up when it's hard, you grow. Every time you speak your truth, you grow. Every time you keep going, even after a failure, you grow. And that growth, it doesn't just change how others see you. It changes how you see yourself. And when that changes, everything else follows. So here's my last message for you. Don't wait for someone to make you feel strong. Don't wait for perfect English. Don't wait for perfect timing. Don't wait for approval or applause. The confidence you need is already within you. You just need to feed it with courage, with truth, with love. So speak with calm. Walk with purpose. Look people in the eyes. Listen with your heart. And never be afraid to say, I'm still learning, but I'm still showing up. Because that's what confident people do. And now, that's what you do too. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing growth. Thank you for walking this journey. Not just to learn English, but to learn life. You are not alone, and you are more capable than you think. Until next time, keep your head high, your voice steady, and your heart open. Your journey has just begun.